Right now. Okay. So we're recording. So Emily, this was prompted by you. So anyway, cool. So I know Jesse is taking a break right now from kind of not
Right.
work-related projects.
Yeah.
Minaka, um, I was hoping would join.
Right.
She joined us, I think, last time the four of us talked, and then someone else mentioned today that they might hop on just kind of last minute, but I don't know. Uh, they were able. Looks like they weren't yet, at least. John Harmon. And then Aaron set up a reminder for the channel, so I was wondering if Aaron was going to hop on.
Oh, I think I lost you there for a second.
Oh, no problem. I was just anyone who commented in the channel earlier today, I was wondering if they would hop on, but looks like
Yeah,
not.
I saw one more. Let's see, who is that who said they were gonna try and make it? John Harmon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, I mean, we could get started, and as people
Yeah, sounds great.
show up, get them caught up. So I had a couple of thoughts I wanted to share, but what do you have?
Um, so thanks for asking. Nothing
Sure.
particular. Some big thoughts, just that I wanted to thank you for your work on kind of framing and setting a good foundation for this. I think the how to use is fantastic. I feel like it gives us an aim. It gives us kind of a goal, which is not my tendency as a writer. I kind of just dive in, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I think, I mean, I'm really grateful that you took the time to do that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was hoping to, yeah, that's really it, actually, Ryan. That's the only big picture thing I
Okay.
had.
I went through the stuff that you put in there. I think that looks still really good too.
Oh, you're kind. It's
It,
just, yeah.
I think it's starting to come together, which is nice. I think that, now that it's got a little bit of shape to it, that'll make it a little bit easier for people to jump in. Because I think it's hard, when folks are coming into the project and it's still in that stage where it's taking shape. That's really, I know for me, that's like the hardest part. So, but
Yeah.
now it's like there's some flesh on it. And I think that's going to be really welcoming to people. I think I was trying to get a sense of the overall narrative of it, and
Yeah.
like thinking of it, if you sort of look at the way the chapters are laid out, to me it takes sort of like there's roughly three parts, right? There's the first, I think, let me pull the chapters up here. There's
Ryan, actually,
chapters one.
oh, I'm sorry. If I can just
Go ahead.
interject really quick, because there was
Yeah,
a second thing I wanted to mention. I'm so sorry for interrupting.
sure.
I
No, go
was
ahead.
thinking I added this students doing data science, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to, as I kind of came to think about it again, I wonder if that should go. I think we should definitely mention it and say this is not in scope of the book. This is an exciting area, but I think it felt like it was kind of um, to me making the goal a little less clear. Sorry to
Is
interrupt.
it like, no, it's okay.
Thank you.
Let's talk about that. What was the general, was it students in data science? So that is like students who are somewhere in like the K-12 system learning data science as the part of the curriculum. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I said better than I even in my very little way did. Yes.
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't that. I saw it and like that could have meant a couple of things, but I assumed that that's what it meant. It's funny that you bring it up because when I looked at the overall structure of the work, I tried to challenge myself to say like, okay, so we have these chapters here. How do these fit together in parts, and how do they contribute to the overall narrative of the book? And the first like chapters 1 through 4 like fit really neatly together. Those are all like explaining why it makes sense to have a book about
Well said. Yeah. Yep.
like unique stuff, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like there are parts of this. I think you even wrote in some of your writing. There are parts of this that are like real basic data science problems, and there are parts that are unique to education. And then there's like chapters 5 all the way through the walkthroughs, which are the real technical things. So if you don't know, or you don't know, if you're just starting out in data science, here's some basic kinds of things, and going into advanced work. And then the final part of it is chapters 10 through 12, which is solutions, students do data science, and then resources. And that, like, the purpose of that part wasn't as obvious to me as like the first two. And so I was
Yeah.
while I was waiting, I was just kind of typing out some ideas to say like, so what could bind these things together? And I actually think the students, ultimately, like if the consensus of the group is the students doing data science is not in the scope, then we could save it for like a different thing. But I think there might actually be a place for that, in the sense that if you look at solutions, so like by the time you get to solutions, you've got number one, an understanding of what is unique about data science and education. What are the unique problems that we haven't solved yet? You've now got some like foundational data science skills, like your R stuff and statistics. And then there's like that whole part, which could be about, okay, now that you have all these, what's it like to bring those into a field that doesn't have a scripted way to accept it yet? Which is like, I've got some other writing happening in another project that is specifically about K-12 stuff. But so I've been thinking about this a lot, which is,
cool.
You can come into this with all the technical skills, but there's this other problem that is not so technical, which is we're stepping into a field that's like, it's kind of hit and miss whether or not people know how to incorporate the skills of a data scientist. Like, I think if you're lucky, you might have a K-12 system that is ready to do that. If not, then you kind of have to, that's its own skill, right? Is to understand where people are at with it. And I think the students doing so, to all of that is a long-winded way of bringing back to your original point about the students doing data science.
Well, thanks.
The short-term solutions, the kind of midterm solutions, those can all be in like the solutions part. So how to communicate your results, how to get people to think in terms of scale, how to get that type of thing, how to ask good data science questions, right? But then there's like the far out into the future solutions, which could be the students doing data science part, which is, okay, so knowing that data science there isn't a scripted way to accept it into the school system, how do we teach current students processes so that by the time they are our age and working in education, those things are like hammered out? You know what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah.
So I actually do think if we wanted to go that way, I think that would be a great way to write that chapter 11, that students doing data science. It would kind of fit nicely into that final part, which is like, okay, so you have all the skills, but that's not really all of the solution to the problem. Like, particularly if you are stepping into a school district.
Yeah. Okay, I see this now clearly too. So it could be even post-secondary too. It could be what does a teacher preparation program do? Do we think about these skills? Do we at least introduce them to teacher candidates? Other administrators, I'm thinking counselors, I'm thinking, I know school psychologists work with a lot of data, at least the ones I know.
Yep.
Yeah, here we are. So I think you came to a good conclusion I'm sorry if it was, well, not sorry. Thanks for doing all your thinking about this. I don't know if it was for a good initial reason, in that I just wasn't thinking super clearly about where it fit. And so that's why I really interrupted. I was feeling a little self-conscious about it, that it didn't fit in. Okay.
Well, I don't think you have to apologize about that. And here's why, because process-wise, I think one of the ways that we could stumble on really interesting ways to write this book is if we have things that intuitively just kind of feel like we should throw them in there. And I think we should throw them in there and then challenge ourselves to think about, so then how can we make that fit into the narrative, right? Because that's what got me asking the question, like, okay, but what is the narrative for those last three chapters? Like, they seem like intuitively relevant things, but what's the through line of those last three chapters? And that's what got me thinking about, like, okay, so like let's kind of force the pieces in a little bit and sort of see if that's useful. And I think it actually could be.
I like the way you describe the short-term solution, communicating results, building a culture where data is meaningful data is collected from the start and saved in good way, and then communicating, kind of like you said, arguing for why a programming language is sometimes helpful, arguing for how it can scale and be used across the organization, and thinking about longer term things like more cultural things, who collect, like I have a tendency to not focus super well. hence my self-consciousness about this in a way. But I like some of it's like post-secondary, some of it's K-12 even, and some of it
Yeah,
might be things like what data do we prioritize collecting? I mean, that's some in some
right.
ways that's already a question that's answered based on what's in some system or what the state
Yeah,
requires is collected. But in other ways, for like online learning environments, should we be collecting clickstream data? Should we
right, right.
be? How do we save that data? Um, these kind of
I think
questions.
it's a really interesting question because I think a lot of what drives the way data is collected in schools right now is um, folks who are writing software and data collection systems, like they don't have any expectation that the folks on the other end of that are going to be pulling a text file out, loading it into R, and then building a model. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
not the audience they're writing for.
Mm-hmm.
They're writing for folks to interact with it, with a nice interface and something that they can do maybe on the web. They're catering to the current, and I'm just talking about K-12 where all my experiences, they're catering to the state of data questions, right? Which is like people want to look at percentages and totals. They want to maybe look at, things over time. And so the software produces data for that. I think in the future, if we have some thought about the way that we could teach students to to grow the expectations for data, then that would build demand for okay, I want all this stuff. I want like the GUIs and the nice interactives and those types of things. But then there's now this growing audience of teachers and administrators who are like, hey,
Mm.
I also want to be able
Wow.
to grab that data out from behind, visualize it, build it, model it, and do all those things. And I think when the demand for that happens, then the software developers doing all of the instructional technology will have a reason then because it becomes marketable, right? But right now it's I think we're lucky if you can get the data out of it, but that's about as far as they go, right? That is sort of, in my experience, um, that's what I've seen. So if we write this chapter in a way that's okay, so with that as a possible future, how do we teach students to expect that? Work with how do we teach students to work with several different consumers of data? Like you've got consumers of data who just want to be able to look at very sort of basic summaries, and they're fine with the vendor's vision of how to present the data. From that end of the spectrum all the way to the other end, where it's you've got some real data. You've got this growing population of real data, deep sort of data science people who are going to want to take that data and work with it in a lot more just sort of deeper and customizable ways.
Build it into their assessment and feedback and communication with
Totally.
parents.
Right. Because I think that's sort of where, I really think that's where I would like to see it going, where you've got, a handful of folks who just want to take it a little bit further and that's an acceptable thing for them to do. That's kind of, to me, that's sort of the next, how do we sort of ease into that, where it's not such a weird thing to say hey, can I get the text file for this,
Mm.
for this thing? Where I work, that just doesn't happen very often, and I think if people are kind, then I get it. But or maybe I'll connect with a statistician who's maybe a few sort of steps removed from the classroom. I can sort of talk to that person, but it would be nice to be able to say to live in a world where it's you have both of those things happening, right? You can sort of you can go as deep as you want, but if you don't want to, then you also have the stuff that's always been there.
I love the way you put that. Yeah, there's some teachers who it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be touched on in their teacher preparation or in other settings
Right.
that this data is important, but it'll be in they'll interact with that data in different ways that are meaningful to them.
Yeah, for sure. So here's what I'm proposing for a next step is because we just talked about a bunch of sort of different things. I could put a little bit of flesh on that and just sort of let me process that idea a little bit more and maybe just rough out a little bit of a, not a real sort of narrative for chapter 11, but just kind of an outline to get the main points in there. And then, people can sort of adjust those points and sort of shape them in different ways if they think it's better. But if they like those points, then they can start to then build a narrative around the points.
I think it's great. I really like this. It kind of answers the question Who is this book for? Well, it's for a
Yeah.
number of people who are going to be using data. And
Right.
once you've kind of built these capabilities, you might then use them to do different things.
Yeah.
um, this
I mean,
solution.
it's crazy. It's like, so my son, my oldest son, he's in middle school. He's 11, and he's got a whole section of his there's a whole section of the curriculum that's on probability and statistics,
Hmm.
which is kind of, they sort of use those, they use the formal names and then they kind of roll back the skills so it's age appropriate. But like, I'm not kidding when I say, he said, hey, I know that you work with this, can you please help me? And I looked at it and it was like a whole thing on box plots and like how box plots work and like what the different sort of thresholds were. So to me, that's a signal that's like, not everybody is going to want to code and dig into the depth of, but like the expectations for how to use data are, they're starting to appear in curriculum that's built for like young kids. I mean, it was kind of a crazy thing when I saw it. I'm like, I work with this stuff every day. I never would have thought that that's homework for you.
That's great.
And so I think,
Fantastic.
10, 20, 30, 40 years out, the version of this book will be so much less about the basics of programming statistics and maybe more about like, okay, so how do we work as a team?
Wow.
One, two, or three of which members of this team know how to do all of that, and the rest are all kind of basically still analytic thinkers because that's sort of the way they were sort of taught to be. I mean, who knows for sure, but like that's just a thought I was constantly having, running through my head. It's like, it's going to be different for them, and I think yet the curriculum is still being built. So like this could be a voice for like, hey, hey, maybe this is one way that you could teach kids, with that future in mind.
I love it. That's exactly how I'm. Not how I'm doing anything. That's great. I agree.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll work the ideas up, and then let's just kind of like riff on it, because that's just sort of the beginning. I think as more people chime in, I think it'll probably build a little bit more. So okay, so I have a question for you. The middle, so I think of it as like 3 acts, right? So the first act, and then the second part, which is kind of the technical part, and then the third, which we just talked about. The second part, like I'm kind of intimidated with the writing of the technical part of this, just because I see like Hadley's work in R for Data Science, and to me, that's like, I got so much out of that book. It's kind of
Yeah.
a gold standard in my mind. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's so good.
I don't know how to write like that.
Yeah. I was surprised, not to like be fanboyish, but I remember like hearing the book was coming out, and then it kind of came out, and there was like a couple months where maybe you and I read it and others, and it was like,
Right.
oh my gosh, how does the world not know about this? It's so good. And now I
Yeah.
feel like people are talking about it, but I felt like it was even better than it even got credit for and gets credit for. It not yeah again
Yeah.
not to be fanboyish, but gosh, yeah, I agree. It's
No,
really
I mean, I really do. Like, I'm totally comfortable being fanboyish about it because I got
good.
a ton out
Yeah.
of like, modeling has always been like a challenging thing for me, and I've always just wanted to sort of press on, and I got so much out of that, multiple models. And I had to read it like 3 or 4 times to practice it a bunch of times, but like that really got me over the initial sort of hump of trying to like to learn it. So I would love to see the middle section of this book approximate that, but it raises a couple of questions. I guess the first question is, I'm not that great at writing the way he does, so that will be a challenge. That's kind of one, but that's not an excuse. It's just sort of a thing to think about.
Yeah.
The
No,
second is,
me too.
if we approximate it, but R for data science already exists, what are we doing that's different? That doesn't. I mean, at what point does it become more efficient to say like, for this middle part, you should just stop and then read R for data
Go
science?
get this book, come back in 6 chapters.
Right, like which I don't want to say because it kind of disrupts the flow, but if we buy the idea that we want this technical section in the middle, then one question I think we have to ask is like, so how does this narrative work in a way that is like a value add over?
Yep.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I feel like that's the elephant in the room with this section. I feel like the other parts are pretty completely novel,
Right.
and worthwhile because not just because no one's done it before. I think it's valuable. I think that's the elephant in the room. I think the fact that we're talking about it gives me some confidence that we can work towards some solutions. I guess
Yeah.
if I can say one thing, and I'll just say just that one thing. The particular what we know about doing this in education means that there's some things that we highlight, anticipate, that maybe are for data science appropriately doesn't. Um, I don't have any great examples, but um, the walkthroughs, especially, maybe that's where this is most, um, maybe where that this feature is most emphatic, in that we would be maybe working with data in a format common to how an LMS would export it, to how a state would
Right.
use it. And that doesn't mean there's not 50% overlap, but maybe there's 40% that really is tailored to some specific, not to get too granular, but variable types or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
column names. And they would definitely be touched on, but we would spend more time on them, and we would um, kind of anticipate what a first-time data analyst will think when they see that, or those types of things.
Yeah. So, so in other words, like the value is like a education worker reading the book will look at the walkthrough, and what's different about these walkthroughs compared to R for data science is that they'll look at that and be like, oh, I've actually seen a data set like that. Like that's one that I have sitting on my computer at work. Like,
Yeah. And this
that's
author is
well,
talking to me like someone who's also seen this data set, and they know what I'm trying where I'm
right.
trying to go. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to, yeah, and yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's good. I wonder if, maybe we should, it should be this part, what I'm about to say should be a conversation with more folks, but I wonder
yes.
if that helps us justify chapters 5 is foundational skills and the advanced uses being less in depth,
Hmm.
and we spend more time in the walkthrough, right? So like the way the
Hmm.
narrative works, chapter 4 and 5 is like, hey, here's some basics, right? Basics that you can like open up your computer, you can copy the code, you can run it and it'll work. And then here are the sort of, the kind of the advanced sort of examples of that. Same thing, you can run the code and it'll work. And then if you want to build out that part of your like toolkit a little bit more, there's R for data science.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a ton of time spent on like 7, 8, and 9, which is the walkthroughs, which is now let's take those basic ideas and let's really sort of like take you step by step using data that when you look at it, you should be able to think about your day-to-day work and be like, yeah, that's I actually, this is not Gapminder or like the other examples that Hadley
Right.
uses that are
You can
great examples,
identify the
but they're
type.
like, I don't.
Yep. I think that kind
That
of
would
takes,
I that would work for me.
yeah, and yeah, me too. It removes some of the burden of those chapters, which to me too felt quite um, just uh, just kind of hard to get my to think about.
Yeah,
I added a little content just because my inclination is to put something there and get, so
sure.
it was on like reading data. But as I kind of, I never felt fully comfortable with it. I think because of
Yeah,
the point about just this not being as good of a version of
yeah.
data science.
So, maybe one other thought to add to this is like we can reference some examples of. I have read blog posts on topics that have been like done thoroughly in other books and other videos and stuff like that. And the blog post will have a walkthrough and teach you how to do something, and at the end we'll say like, hey, this is like just the start. You should really read, Hadley's book on packages or whatever, or this other thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll have to think about this a little bit more, but I gotta say, like, reading the blog post did feel like there was some value there that I didn't get quite in the book. And I don't know if it's because it was shorter or if it was more practical or if it was just done in a less
Yep.
instructional tone.
Yep.
Like
I know
it,
what you
but
mean.
I'll have to reflect on that. But I'm saying that to suggest that like we could, I think if we sort of thought through this, we could write chapter 4 and 5 so that there's still something there that people like that will draw them into R for data science if they want to go a little bit deeper, but still get the general idea. Because I have had that experience as a reader. Like I sort of, it's like I know Hadley does a whole book on this, but somehow like this post that took me 30 minutes to like work through was perfect for me and for how to build an R package or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I've had the same thing with it's like someone has a different perspective on someone's own work, and it's kind of sometimes
Right.
valuable. When I'm thinking about it's one of the books on data visualization. It's someone at, I forget. Anyway, It just like, I think because he brought his own kind of vision to ggplot, and it
Yeah.
kind of just emphasized things that I think weren't in the other texts.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I agree.
All right. Well, I feel like I've got enough to go on. I think I'm probably going to just write up just a couple of notes just to sort of clarify it, because I think we covered like a lot of good ground here. And then
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
the first thing that I will tackle is just hammering out some basic narrative ideas for the students doing data science part,
Cool.
and then maybe some basic like kind of tonal things for chapters 4 and 5, just to say like, hey, let's like, whenever in doubt, let's shoot for this kind of tone, which is, for example, here's enough to get you started. Now go read Hadley's book. I don't know that
Yeah.
that should be sort of feel of it, but to just kind of bring some definition to that, so that I think that'll help people want to write there a little bit more. Because when I look at those chapters, I'm like, oh man, I do not want to start that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's big.
And I think we all have some anxiety too about like, will it be good enough? Like, not even like the code, like right. So
Yeah.
like, everyone has different sense of coding style, and
Right.
not to mention how to write it in terms of describing like the text around
Yeah.
the code too. So yeah, I think
Right.
that
Right.
that sounds like great bits to bite off. I had talked about
Yeah.
starting on the walkthrough. I added
Mhm.
a data set. You saw I started working on that synth pop. I actually had
Yeah.
it does seem promising. I couldn't really get it to work, at least this morning when I was at a coffee shop.
That package.
Yeah, I got it. I mean, I had a large data set, 4,000 rows, 10
Hmm.
variables. Didn't work. I made it like 6 variables. Didn't work. I made it 200 rows, 200 rows, 6 variables. So pretty small at that point. It worked. And then I tried making it 1,000, and it didn't really work again. I waited like 15, 20 minutes, and it just seemed to hang.
Is it the gist of the package is to take a data set that has a bunch of private data in it and then to like scramble it?
That's my understanding. In some
Yeah.
sophisticated ways, like somehow retaining like the relations among the variables, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Which is, yeah, that's, I mean, if it works, that's like a major solution. Yeah. Cause I'll make like these fake ones, but then in making
oh
it
cool.
fake, the underlying structure of the data like is no longer plausible. So you just sort of like, you run like a visualization, and you're like, yeah, this just doesn't look like real life at all because it's all just random. But um,
That's
yeah, but
funny that randomness doesn't look like real life. Isn't that a yeah,
I
anyway.
know it's like it's to the point that it's not instructive because you're trying to make a point about how this should work, and like I think anybody who works in schools and works with a particular data set all the time will expect certain properties in that data set. And if it doesn't hold those properties, then it just automatically loses its sort of, you lose your connection to it.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
so I struggle with that. Like, okay, so how do I build my fake data set package so that it can still retain some semblance of like an actual thing? And I'm not happy with it.
What have you yeah, I didn't know you've done so much work on this. In this area.
Well, it was just that one that I had sent you where, so
Oh
I
my gosh.
work in
Yeah.
a specific special ed data set in California. Like I'm in this thing all the time. And a lot of the work that I do, it's a real practical problem. I do the work at home because it's my work. And, I don't want to be at the office kind of experimenting with ideas that I want to be able to consult with other people on at a different time. So, but the problem with that, of course, is that I'm not going to take student data home. So then the next sort of challenge
Right.
is, all right, so how do I build a data set that approximates not only the structure of the special ed data set, but also the underlying kinds of properties of it, so that I can write my solutions on top of that, and then bring like just clone my repo back at work and run it on actual real data. So the package that I made it constructs the data set with the same format of columns, the same column names, and
Brilliant.
um, uses the same, like for the most part, uses the same factors, but there's like 80 columns. And I'm not going to build the same factors for every single column because they're just not relevant. But what ends up happening then is when I build my solutions, I end up with these implausible results, and I can't sort of tell like, oh, would that really work on like a real sort of system? I gotta wait till like the next day and I'll run it. And anyway, it's I mean progress, but it's just not. I'm not happy with it.
Brilliant. No, I forgot that we had talked about this. Um, I'm impressed. That's cool. And just like the general solution of how seriously you take anonymizing the data and the way you.
I did. It's kind of a scare. We've had some like local kind of bad things happen, and it's not with our district, but like I've seen other districts make terrible mistakes about how they work with their data. It's just,
Yeah.
I found an awesome package called Random Names. You heard of Random Names?
No.
Okay, so I build. It's a requirement in my package, but basically what it does is it creates a whole list of random names, and it's got arguments for like, do you want just the first name? Do you want just the last name? Do you want male and female? Do you want names commonly found in certain race groups, or a mix of it? And then so I use that in my package so that when the fake data set is produced, it's actually got like names in it. And I just have to make sure whenever I say like, here's a fake data set, for people at work, I just have to tell them like, it looks so much like a real data set until you start like analyzing it, you'll see that the properties are broken, but like the look of it looks real enough. So I'm usually telling people like, don't email this around because it actually looks like this could be it's not like a real thing.
It's like a fine wine. Only the very best tasters will tell the difference. That's cool.
Yes. Yeah. If you try to build like a model, you'll immediately see like, this is not real life. But like, if you're not building a model and you're just sort of sorting it, like actually it's a real thing.
Can you remind me the name? I'm sorry to ask. I'm
of the package.
Yeah. Pardon me.
Yeah. Why don't I put it in the Slack thing here that we'll have a record of it. Let's see. So, by the way, I don't know, like at this, we kind of got a little off the rails. I don't know if your colleague would want all of this in the recording. I'm fine with it, but I just want to like, I don't know if she wants like an hour-long thing of random names, but
knowing Emily, she is both very very talented, very engaged, and very kind. So even if she didn't like it, she wouldn't tell us. But
all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so mine is called Sped Tools.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, let's see. So I'm gonna send it to you right now. Do you have your Slack open?
Yep.
Okay. All right, there it is.
Brilliant. I might play around with it too because right now, at least, I'm having trouble getting traction with the other one. In part because it just does way more than I understand and know about right now. Cool.
So this one is it's specifically meant to mimic the data set that I use, but like, if that's not relevant to you, then feel free to like do a PR on this and take the function that creates the data set and make one for like a grade book or something like that, like whatever it is that.
I would love to think about this for the data I work with is maybe fundamentally a little less. Well, I'm not going to put a value label on it, but it's usually self-report data, usually motivation related with some kind of achievement related outcomes. And so it's a little less interesting in some ways, but I think for learning, I mean, that's what people encounter a lot. That's what when they do their students I supervise who will be doing a master's thesis or other work, that's the kind of data that they'll often encounter. So it'd be really cool to have a way to generate that kind of data. I struggle a lot. It took me a while to come up with one data set that I could share, and this one I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure I'm ready to share it.
Well, I think like you're thinking on this could make this package really interesting, in that like I've got this one function that's like it's called make table A, which makes.
I just had it open.
What if we had like 5 functions and like one is make a fake survey results data set, and say it's built on top of like what an actual Survey Monkey, Excel export would look like or something like that. And what if one is like what you're talking about? What is like a motivational data set then?
I think
like we can have a function for like every, single, well, I mean, not every, but like a lot of different ones, so that if somebody came to the data science and education book and they said, well, I work in this I work in HR and education. So, what's a data set I would like to see a data set that, I would see in HR, like it's a personnel data set or something like that. Like we could build all of those into the package.
I love it. Some kind of longitudinal data set, maybe some from like an
Yeah,
LMS,
sure, yeah.
time spent on course or something like that. These kind of
Yeah,
variables. Um,
totally.
huh. I wonder if this could be part of our packet of the book effort in some formal way.
I mean, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's all on GitHub, and I totally would love for people to sort of, help me develop it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Taking a look. We'll take a we'll
All
dive in.
right. I think that's about all the time I've got. So I've got to wrap it up, and I'm gonna get a just sort of like rough action list going here, and then I'll probably start on the. I'm on. So by the way, I'm on vacation right now, which is why I've been particularly productive
Oh man, thank
on
you.
this.
Oh, right.
Like actually enjoy, like this is my, like I like doing this type of thing. I just can't when I'm not on vacation. I'm working in these little tiny like 5-10 minute pockets. It's just not enough. But now I can get up early for the kids, get up and put in 30 minutes, and like
Awesome. Thank
it
you.
works well.
Thanks for being
I'm
willing.
saying that well, you're welcome. And also I'm saying that as like a future apology. Once I go back to work, then
That's
it's gonna
hilarious.
like
Back at
thing,
work,
so.
then yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Well, cool.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, you too. I'm gonna look for the action list that you generate when you get a
Okay.
chance.
Yeah, where do you want me? Do you want me to just put it on Slack, or like, or do you want me to make an issue out of it, or?
Issue would be nice.
Okay.
If that's good to you, that'd be great. I'll take a look at it. I added some ideas. At least I added some info on the data set for that walkthrough. So I might turn some attention to that in the short term. Get some code there for one of the walkthroughs. And yeah, I think that'll take some time because I don't know what I'll find. I want it to be the kind of thing where there are interesting patterns in the data that people might come to and that we might illustrate. So that'll take a little time. So I think I'll concentrate on that.
Okay.
If we could maybe roughly talk in, this was a long time, but it kind of seemed to work pretty well, like a month and a half, 2 months or
It
something.
worked great for me.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a
What did
long
we
time.
What did we do? Like 2 months or what?
I think it was 2. It feels like that. I think.
Okay. I mean, if you're feeling like it's too long, then maybe we do like 6 weeks or something.
That works for me.
Okay. So we should pick a date now, huh?
Is that okay? Sorry, I didn't mean, I wasn't really going there, but.
No, I'm a big fan of like ending meetings with the next meeting date, or otherwise like.
Yeah. Okay. So
it can sort of fall off. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm seeing the week of August 6th. Is that what you're seeing?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. This time works great for me. Like I've got flexibility on the day.
Yeah, me too. All good. I have Thursday night. I'll be teaching a class. I learned this, so that's good to know for me.
Okay.
Otherwise, the other 4 days are. Oh, what am I talking about? It's August. This is not a recurring meeting. Any day that week is good.
How about the 7th?
Sounds good.
Okay. Cool.
I'll let you go. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do you want to put that data out on the Slack channel? That way everybody's got it.
Yep, I'm happy to.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Joshua. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.